Welcome back, Defenders. I think we know what Russia's plan for this winter is. Big Kremlin offensive to kick Ukraine's army out of Russia. Except it's off to a rocky start. General Sursky himself is monitoring the situation in Kursk, and here's what he says. If not for the resilience of our soldiers, tens of thousands of enemy forces from Russia's best assault units would be attacking our positions towards Pokrovsk, Kurakhove, and Toretsk, significantly worsening the situation on the front. This is the Russians' primary objective, and I'm pretty confident Putin has given them a hard deadline of January 20th. Under no circumstances is it acceptable to Vladimir Putin that Ukraine be holding any of Russia's territory within the next 2 months. They have a serious deadline here. So they're panicking. I think Russian generals are scared of being purged or arrested if they don't accomplish this feat. So Russian forces are launching assaults every 10 to 15 minutes in Kursk. This is according to Ukrainian military reports. How the Russians have been doing this is they send out 4 or 8-man squads to just charge at Ukrainian positions. If they die, great. That Ukrainian position is now down some ammunition. Send in the next wave. Keep sending waves until that Ukrainian defensive position runs out of ammunition. We have videos. Lots and lots of videos have hit the internet the last couple days since Tuesday's election. I'm going to link these down below if you want to see this failed assault. The 95th Brigade of Ukraine repelled attacks over the course of 2 days. Russia lost 28 armored vehicles. Here's a separate video, this one from the 47th Brigade. The Russians deployed more than 30 units of equipment and battalion-sized personnel. All of it's being repelled, but the wave of attacks are just going to keep coming. They're not going to stop. So I don't think these casualty reports are an exaggeration. This was the highest single casualty loss for the Russian military of this entire war. 1,950. And yesterday was a previous record at 1,700. So this war is becoming increasingly more deadly for the Russian forces. Because I think Putin is starting to question, what does it mean now that Donald Trump has won? What will the terms of negotiation be when he takes office? Putin wants all of his territory in Kursk back. I'm going to link some more videos down below. I obviously can't show you violence. I can't show you corpses. This is a 1-minute clip of a Russian soldier walking through a trench, and there's just bodies. The bodies of Russian soldiers everywhere. I'm also going to link this video down below, and this is pretty disturbing. This is a 62-year-old Russian man who has been stripped naked and put in a pit. This is how the Russians have been disciplining their soldiers the last 2 years. Whenever someone does something you don't like, you strip them naked and put them in a pit for 3 days without food and water. There's countless videos online now of the Russian military doing this. This video is hard for me to watch even, because this is an elderly man. He's 62, and he's completely naked in this video, freezing in the November cold. The person taking this video doesn't care. He simply says, if he survives, effing great. If he doesn't survive, well, F him. This 62-year-old man was being punished for leaving behind some equipment at a previous position. Any mistake in the Russian military now is potentially a death sentence from your own commanders. Your own military leadership is stripping people naked and throwing them in pits for any offense in the wintertime. I shouldn't laugh, but this is terrible, guys. So here's an update from Defense Minister Umerov. I held a conversation with Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, informed him about the current situation on the battlefield. We discussed further steps to strengthen our army and ensure Ukrainian soldiers have everything they need by the end of the year. I am grateful to the United States for its unwavering support and strong partnership. So Ukraine's military is going to get a huge boost this winter. President Biden, before he leaves office on January 20th, has to allocate the remaining $6 billion that's left over from the appropriations passed by Congress last May. So there's going to be some very large security assistance packages announced over the next month or so. And I mean, we got like 67 days. As much of this needs to be delivered as possible, because we don't know what Trump will do when he takes office. He might freeze anything in transit, saying, I'm going to halt all deliveries of promised goods until I negotiate with Putin or whatever. So the Allies are adjusting to the new reality. Donald Trump will be taking office in January. According to The Telegraph, Starmer and Macron aim to push Biden for last-minute shift on Ukraine long-range missile policy ahead of Trump's presidency. British and French leadership are planning urgent discussions in Paris about convincing Biden to authorize deeper Ukrainian strikes into Russian territory. So there's two things Biden can do. Biden can say, all right, I'll allow British Storm Shadow and French Scout missiles to be used, and it's the responsibility of France and the UK. I feel like that's the bare minimum Biden can do. But I do think if enough pressure is applied, if enough people speak to him and tell him, your legacy's on the line, man. How do you want this war to end for Ukraine? There's no risk of escalation management. The Russians are not going to use a nuclear weapon in the next 2 months if they think they're going to get favorable terms from Trump in any kind of negotiations. So just approve it. Approve ATACMS, approve JASSMs. Let these long-range weapons strike valid military targets up to 300 kilometers deep inside of Russia. This is the week to be applying political pressure on Joe Biden to reverse this policy. So let's talk about Trump. And I think President Zelensky was hedging his bets that Trump could return to power. And in Zelensky's peace plan that he was promoting to Western leaders, there were two aspects of this peace plan that I think were designed for Trump to get his attention. The first one being Zelensky's plan to replace U.S. troops in Europe with Ukrainian forces. So Zelensky said, our victory plan includes, let's have Ukrainian troops defend Europe. And American troops don't have to be stationed in Germany. They don't have to be stationed in the Netherlands. I still argue it's for America's benefit for them to remain there, but this is something that Trump could argue to his base. Look what I did. I got a troop reduction on the European continent. These people are coming back to the United States, or we're going to redeploy them to the Pacific to help contain China. This is something that Trump might like. The other aspect was the enticement of Ukraine's untapped natural resources, oil and gas and mineral deposits. Ukraine is sitting on a gold mine, basically, of untapped resources. And if the Russians take it, Ukraine's lost it forever. So Ukraine could entice Trump by offering him favorable terms. If you continue supporting us, if you help us defeat Russia, then when it's time to bid on contracts to get this oil and gas or minerals out of the ground, we'll give preferential contracts to American companies, or something to that line. Is that an ideal situation? No. But if Russia takes this territory, Ukraine lost it anyways. So you got to make a deal. You got to negotiate. Trump is entirely transactional, and I think Zelensky is already going in this direction. So we're no longer going to speculate. What will Trump do? We need to start talking about what has Trump done. And he's starting to name members of his future cabinets. This is very important. And Trump picks Mike Waltz as national security advisor amid shifting Ukraine policy. Who the heck is Mike Waltz? This is the guy that will be replacing Jake Sullivan on January 20th. And he's a member of Congress from Florida, a retired colonel, and a U.S. Army Green Beret. He's written a couple books. I might want to pick up one of them. And this is all fantastic news. This is a qualified, if we want to use that word, national security advisor. And he's been to Ukraine. He posted this tweet on March 3rd of 2022. When I visited Kyiv last year, I called on the Biden administration to rush Ukraine the lethal aid they had been requesting for months. They should have done it before Russia invaded, not after. He also wrote an op-ed in The Economist, and let me read for you what the incoming national security advisor says about Russia and Ukraine. The next president must change course. Supporting Ukraine for as long as it takes in a war of attrition against a larger power is a recipe for failure. The next administration should aim, as Donald Trump has argued, to end the war and stop the killing. America can use economic leverage, including lifting the pause on exports of LNG and cracking down on Russia's illicit oil sales, to bring Mr. Putin to the table. If he refuses to talk, Washington, as Mr. Trump argued, could provide more weapons to Ukraine with fewer restrictions on their use. Faced with the pressure, Mr. Putin will probably take the opportunity to wind the conflict down. His objective at the start of the war was to conduct a lightning strike to subdue Ukraine on his way toward reconstituting the Russian Empire. The next national security advisor has already called Russia an empire wannabe. Fighting a costly war for 3 years to get an outcome in which Ukraine remains independent and more firmly anchored in the West would be a strategic defeat for the Russian leader, and seen as such in Beijing, deter the Chinese. Moreover, this plan is superior to the current White House approach, which lacks a stated goal, but will end in a stalemate with Russia occupying some Ukrainian territory. The current path will just take more time, blood, and treasure to get there. I'm open to this idea. I am open to this line of thinking from Matt Waltz. Here's an appearance he made on Fox News. This was April of 2022, so this was 2 months into the full-scale invasion.
GOP Congressman and National Guard Colonel Michael Waltz sits on the Armed Services Committee, and he joins us now. Colonel, thanks for being here. So you heard him say we need to supply weapons. You got it. And then quickly say we need to designate him as a war criminal. What does Vladimir Putin actually respect and care about now if we're trying to bring this war to a conclusion that's advantageous to the Ukrainians?
Vladimir Putin is going to continue to push until he meets steel, cold, hard steel, hard power, and military might. Pete, today we have Secretary of Defense Austin and General Milley before the Armed Services Committee.
So he's a member of the Armed Services Committee, and he said Putin is not going to stop until he meets steel, cold, hard steel. Now, this interview was from 2 years ago, and he's a MAGA member. And at some point, MAGA members stopped supporting the Biden administration's approach. We lost our bipartisan unity, I guess, because Donald Trump didn't want members of his party publicly talking or talking tough about the Russians prior to the election. So it's a wait and see. I'm very encouraged by previous statements. This man has personally visited Ukraine himself. And I'm open to ideas, any positive ideas he has to make the Russians hurt. The other cabinet position that's interesting is Marco Rubio, a senator from Florida. It looks like he's going to be the next Secretary of State. And Marco Rubio has also made supportive statements of Ukraine in the past.
But now, really, our focus should be on doing everything we can to help Ukraine defeat Russia, whether it's a strategic defeat or an operational one. Putin needs to take an L here, and I believe he will. Certainly on the strategic front, he's going to take an L. And I think he might even take it on operationally, and it could ultimately lead to his downfall.
Russia needs to take an L or a loss. This was posted by Senator Rubio on March 17th of 2022. This was 1 month into the war. Now our focus should be to do everything we can to help Ukraine defeat Putin. Once again, as Donald Trump was gaining momentum in the primary, Republican senators and congressmen started not talking about Ukraine because Trump didn't want them to. So I searched Marco Rubio's Twitter feed, and the last time he talked about Ukraine was in March of last year, 2023. So this was almost a year and a half ago. And he said on a scale of 1 to 10, Ukraine isn't a 10, but it also isn't a 0 either. And either giving them a blank check or doing nothing are not our only options. Unfortunately, Marco Rubio did vote against military aid for Ukraine in the last vote in the Senate. The vote was 79 to 18, and you can look up his voting history. We've got Rubio here, and he voted against military aid for Ukraine. But I argue we know what he really thought at the beginning of this full-scale invasion. He was supportive of Ukraine, critical of the Russians. It's just the political process and the election that I think he either was remaining quiet or changing certain positions, but this is encouraging. Marco Rubio is not insane. He can be a legitimate, helpful, productive Secretary of State. This is good news. As for the good news, that's about it. I like Mike Waltz. I like Marco Rubio. Other people who have been named have said insane things about Ukraine or Russia in the past, such as who Trump is going to name as U.S. ambassador to the UN. But it's interesting getting the reaction from the people who most strongly support Russia, one of them being Jackson Hinkle. Jackson Hinkle is attacking Trump, saying President Trump should have picked for his national security team Tulsi Gabbard, Colonel Douglas McGregor, Rand Paul, RFK Jr., Thomas Massie. Instead, he's choosing what he calls deep staters, Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, and then these two others. Total MAGA betrayal. It's a mixed bag. There are people coming into Trump's administration who have said insane things, and there are normal people coming in who understand the national security apparatus of the United States government, and they want to protect the national security interests of the American people. So there's going to be conflict within Trump's cabinet. These people are going to be conflicting with each other over the topic of Russia and Ukraine. So why? Why would Trump appoint any of these people? And if I'm being honest, I think for a lot of Trump supporters, Russia and Ukraine is not one of their top 5 issues. They don't care really about it. They care more about deterring China. They care more about protecting Israel and stopping Iran. And they might even care more about what's happening on our side of the planet with Cuba and Venezuela. This is a topic that Marco Rubio is deeply interested in. So Trump is picking people on other issues, based on other policy issues he wants to achieve the next 4 years. He's not picking them based on what they've said about Russia and Ukraine in the past. And this is getting really weird with Venezuela, which is a dictatorship, which is friendly with the other dictatorships of the world. And Maduro in Venezuela is the only dictator that Elon Musk doesn't like. Maduro orders 10-day ban on Elon Musk's X in Venezuela after feuding with the billionaire. So I know MAGA voted for Trump thinking he was the peace candidate, 4 years as president, no wars. But there's a very high possibility, I think, the United States military could take action in Venezuela to topple their government and reset the country. Millions of Venezuelans have fled the country to their surrounding neighbors, as well as trying to come to the United States. This is destabilizing our country. The exodus of migrants or anyone who doesn't want to suffer under the Maduro regime. Plus, Venezuela is blessed with abundant natural resources. So I think there might be some people in the Trump administration looking at Venezuela thinking there's serious opportunities here for regime change. Well, let's get back to the Russians. This was an interesting statement put out by Putin's presidential aide, Nikolai Patrushev. And he publicly claimed, this is reported by TASS, Russian news agency, to achieve success in the election, Donald Trump relied on certain forces to which he has corresponding obligations. As a responsible person, he will be obliged to fulfill them. The Russians have admitted to helping Donald Trump. Margarita Simonyan on Kremlin state media bragged about paying right-wing influencers like Tim Pool to promote Russia and to promote Trump. So the Russians definitely did help Trump, but now that Trump has power, does he really care? And that's what we're going to find out after January 20th. It's going to get weird, guys. Dictators are weird, and they're temperamental, and we're going to be going through this together, guys. We're going to be going through this together. We don't know what's going to happen. In the meantime, let's get to the bad news for Russia. Ukrainian drone strikes oil depot in Russia's Belgorod Oblast. This is reported by local officials. Russian drone accidentally hits apartment building in their own city in Belgorod. The Russians bombed themselves again in Belgorod. If you want to see the video of a Russian Shahed drone slamming into one of their own apartment buildings, I'll link the video down below. Russian Mi-24 attack helicopter set ablaze at the Moscow airport. I'm guessing somebody was reached by Ukrainian intelligence and offered some money, and another helicopter was torched. Kursk region refugees protest lack of compensation and housing. These are citizens of Kursk who had to flee their villages and towns when Ukraine invaded over 3 months ago. And the Russian government, shocker, has not been too responsive and helpful for these internal refugees. This is something Russia is just pretending is not a thing, when there are tens of thousands of Russians who had to flee their homes, and they still can't go home 3 months later as we head into the wintertime. So here are people gathering, not really to protest, but to just vent their anger and frustration with their own government.
Не надо нам предлагать, станьте вот здесь, станьте перед этими людьми, вот, которые здесь.
Конечно, всем здесь и объяснить все, зачем куда-то идти.
Нам все равно где замерзать, на улице замерзать или где мы находимся замерзать. Какая нам разница? Мы все равно без дома.
Мы никуда не пойдем, мы будем здесь.
These are mostly pensioners, mostly elderly people. If you're a man under the age of 50, you're never going to participate in any kind of gathering or protest because you're going to get nabbed and then forced into the military. But I could be wrong. Here's this guy. These are residents of this Ukrainian village in Kursk. They were all forced to flee their home. They filmed a 20-minute video appealing directly to Vladimir Putin for help. Hello. We would like to address our respected president, Vladimir Putin. People from borderlands gathered here, including Kachuk village, Sheptukhovkola village council. Here's the situation. During the election in November of 2023, we fully supported our beloved president. We had a very high attendance. Over 80% voted for Putin. We hoped for your help and protection, and we still hope for your help. People come with different situations. Situations are different. Some want to return, others do not. But let's not speak about the past and how evacuation was carried out or wasn't carried out very well. or how the breakthrough by Ukrainian forces occurred in the first place to the Russian territory. It's in the past. Please, let's think about the future, particularly pensioners, who are the majority in the rural areas. They're almost all pensioners. How can these people live further and hope for some help from the states? We ended up in each has their own story. We all came across that some want to return. They're ready to wait a day or two or a month or 2 months or 6 months, but they want to return. Blah, blah, blah. This guy's about to get mobilized. Russia faces a wave of bankruptcies as borrowing costs skyrocket. This is going to be the story of 2025 for the Russian economy. Russian businesses are bracing themselves for a financial crunch that could put many of them out of business. The central bank's interest rate has reached a crushing 21%, with expectations for a further hike coming up in December. And over the last 2 years, companies have built up significant commercial debt with floating rate interest payments. That's not good. Late payments from customers and partners have been climbing, signaling distress in the corporate sector as firms struggle to service debt under such high rates. With real interest rates, once bank premiums are factored in, effectively reaching 25% for a business loan. Russia's screwed. It's never going to get better. Russia preparing mass government layoffs. The Russian government plans to lay off about 400,000 civil servants by July of next year, targeting a reduction in 10% of their government workforce. I imagine inside of Russia, these are good-paying jobs. To be loyal to the Putin regime and to work for the government relative to other jobs you could get inside of Russia, I'm sure the pay and benefits and working conditions are pretty decent. But the Russian government is collapsing, and they're about to fire 10% of their workforce. So what are these people going to do for jobs? How Russia's regions entice Ukraine war recruits with money. This is a really interesting article giving a breakdown of all the sign-up bonuses you can get in certain regions. In Novgorod, the governor has announced a 3 million ruble sign-up bonus. So if you're a Russian man and you want to sign a contract, $30,000 upfront payments, plus you get, $2,000 a month. How this works in Russia is each region is responsible for recruiting, and if they can't recruit their necessary quota based on their population, the governor has to pay people. And I think Russians from other regions then, for example, will go to Belgorod and use somebody else's address to say they're a local, and then sign a contract to get the bonus. It's pretty bleak. Let's get to the good news for Ukraine. Ukraine's defense sector receives 600 million boost from Denmark. Thank you so much to the Danish people. You guys have been incredible. Estonia announces a new military aid package for Ukraine. Thank you so much to the people of Estonia. According to Forbes, Taiwan quietly armed Ukraine with critical air defense systems. The Taiwanese provided Ukraine with a bunch of Hawk air defense systems, so I imagine they need all the air defense systems they can get for themselves, but the Taiwanese are doing what they can. They're still helping. Thank you so much to the amazing people of Taiwan. Final feel-good clip I want to share with you is about the 2-year anniversary of the liberation of the city of Kherson. Kherson was liberated November 11th of 2022. And friend of the channel, Zarina Zabriskie, was in the town on the 2-year anniversary, and this is the video she wants to share with you.
Today is the second anniversary of the liberation of Kherson. Since I was here 2 years ago, I remember this square being full of rejoicing people, of the joy, of cheers.
у своїй сторонці.
Україна! Херсон – це Україна! Херсон – це Україна! А ми нашу славну Україну! Гей, гей, розвеселимо!
There are still people who want to come and show the flags that they kept through the 9 months of occupation.
Чесно, зараз я не можу. Так. Це був найщасливіший день в житті. Я з Одеси приїхала спеціально сьогодні сюди. Поки вимушена там, а так хочеться додому.
That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.